Welcome back to another episode of this show where I try to bring you the latest in crypto news from around the world in a brief and concise manner. That said, let's get to the news. Let's start off with a company that has a large influence in the content creation space, YouTube. In an official post on YouTube's blog website, it seems as though the CEO has hinted at potential interest in the NFT space along with other crypto assets. In a quote, "We are always focused on expanding the YouTube ecosystem to help creators capitalize on emerging technologies, including things like NFTs, while continuing to strengthen and enhance the experiences creators and fans have on YouTube." The notable section coming from here is that it wishes to again enhance and make it easier for the creators and the experience that is had by all viewers and creators. This is a notable claim that YouTube continues to make to this day, citing many times that they wish for the creators to be the forefront and the most important part of the platform. Along with NFTs, the CEO also mentioned Web3 and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which it sees as potential other opportunities that it may be exploring in the future. All of this is on the heels of Twitter announcing its recent foray into NFTs, allowing users to update their profile pic with an NFT that will be denoted by a soft hexagon instead of a round profile picture. This should be interesting to see if this is a play in a similar direction where it would be a small step into the NFT space, allowing you to use it perhaps as banners or social images, or maybe it's much more, something we could look forward to actually being allowed to natively create and manage your NFTs or content, which could potentially become NFTs in the space itself. That said, there are noticeable pushbacks from the community. As noted on the Twitter timeline, there are a lot of upset people about this sort of decision, something to be taken with a grain of salt, as people generally do have a hard time with change, no matter what the change. In a quote here from Sean Fay Wolf, "NFTs have zero place on YouTube. They don't grow a connection between creators and fans. They divide people more than ever before." I wouldn't say this is necessarily the gentleman's sentiment when browsing through Twitter after doing a search for this announcement, but there does seem to be some concerns from a lot of creators about the move into the NFT space by YouTube. A lot of people like the way things are right now, or at very least don't want too many more changes from a company that's been known to make changes against the community's wishes, such as the dislike button and having such features removed that people generally found useful or liked in place. I think anytime a company of this size gets involved with it, I do like to see the potential push as more people become interested in the subject matter, and hopefully it will allow crypto to be seen more in the light. But we do know that when a company of this size, attached to Google, even bigger, has some power to go into a space, they're going to potentially start making some moves, and they can really move the needle one way or another. So this should be an interesting play to see from one of the world's largest companies. Now into what I have grouped our second section of today's news. I'm going to be taking us on a little bit of a journey around the world, as it seems to have a worldly theme right now, all on a macro scale of things happening in different countries. And in our first stop, let's hop over to Indonesia. It seems as though Indonesian regulators are to ban sales and exchange of crypto through institutions. The financial services organization OJK has posted a Twitter post stating that they wish no longer for institutions to trade, sell, or exchange cryptocurrencies in any way. This also would include any sort of marketing or promotion on behalf of cryptocurrencies. It seems as though the financial institution has had a little bit of push from religious authorities within the country. OJK has strictly prohibited financial service institutions from using marketing and or facilitating crypto asset trading. It seems as though any major religious group in Indonesia seems to have a large disliking of crypto. Now, I know that Indonesia might not have quite the influence that, say, China or the US would have on economic policy or the crypto asset class as a whole. It is still interesting to see what smaller nations are doing with the regulations and how they're approaching crypto, as the tally will start to increase across the world. And as we start to see where people lie on either side of it, it could be an indicator of what is in store for crypto in the future. So I'm interested to kind of keep the tally there, and at least a running tally as far as which countries or general sections of the world I see are taking a side to crypto as a whole. Continuing on our journey across the world, it's now time to go a little further north into Russia to see what the Kremlin has to say about crypto now. It seems as though Vladimir Putin has made a side remark regarding crypto mining and the advantages that Russia has in this space. Could this be a glimmer of hope from a country whose central bank has recently requested that all cryptocurrencies be banned across the board? The often opposed leader started a January 26th conference with the "Let us start the issue that is currently in the spotlight, the regulation of cryptocurrencies." In a quote, "Of course, we also have certain competitive advantages here, especially in so-called mining. I mean the surplus of electricity and the well-trained personnel available in the country. This is due to the fact that many European nations around Russia have a much higher electricity cost." And the obviously tag to having well-trained individuals would be claiming that its own people could benefit from the economy as far as growing potential in jobs that would be placed if there were to be a foray into this potential mining. This is a surprise move from the leader, as there was the previous mentioned central bank sort of request that ban be placed on the entire asset class. It seems as though only a couple of days ago, Russian finance ministry official actually made some calls for crypto regulations and not the strict restrictions that had been proposed by the central bank. This is another surprising move from a country that is generally outspoken and plays by its own set of rules. If we look at crypto as a whole, the decentralized nature doesn't really seem to fit into what you would think Russia would want ultimately. With countries like China going very hard into CBCDs and putting blanket bans across all crypto spaces on and off throughout their entire sort of tenure in looking in the space, you would consider Russia to sort of take a similar adoption, but it seems as though they're not, and maybe having a slight open mind when it comes to the entire space. Again, decentralization not really playing into the whole field, but as we can imagine, all countries are looking to put some form of regulation onto the space, or at least say that they're looking into it. Don't get too wild. Let's keep everyone understanding that we're at least looking into this and not to get too silly with it. Let's keep an eye on what Russia does, because this would be a big one on that tally. Again, we're talking about smaller countries putting bans and seeing how they're playing it out. It should be very interesting to see what a country like Russia really does. And if they do decide to open those doors and play in the mining space and actually make it part of maybe their economic output, it could be a very interesting play from a very large company, again, taking the opposite side to say what the US has taken. And the US has been stating quite a lot lately that it has a very interesting stance on crypto. Obviously, we do allow it to happen, but we're looking at regulations and still not really sure. But I know that Uncle Sam is going to have a hard time with the whole decentralized nature itself as a whole too, which is why I'm going to move right on to our next story, where we're jumping into the US economy, and we're going to start talking about President Biden. In a CoinDesk report, it appears that the Biden administration is looking to release some sort of its own report on its regulations and general consensus around cryptocurrencies. We could be looking to see this report as early as February, but some say it is actually being worked on now, with regular meetings being happen with the president and the official people drafting the document. As we know, there have been a lot of notable government agencies here in the US who have been playing and already making suggestions and writing papers regarding the crypto space. SEC being of the utmost high on there, just because of their sort of playing around with the EFT space and regulations as far as being the governing body for it. As far as what we can expect to be inside this report, it should be interesting to see ultimately what ends up being in it, but I would imagine it's going to be putting some demarcation lines around who's going to be actually regulating, what bodies will be in charge of what parts of the space, and probably seeing a little bit of the White House looking to maintain some control for the time being, because at this point we still don't have real regulations around it, and I don't think they've had enough time to fully vet the concept on how they want to go about it. So as long as they keep control, they can go about it in a slower manner, and at least this is just sort of like, hey guys, this is what we're thinking, we're looking to put some regulations in place, be prepared for that, but we need more time, and we're going to be continuing on this. Again, the same sort of narrative that I've been playing off of that I think all countries are looking to do right now. This certainly is something to keep an eye on, as we have a lot of volatility in the markets. And as we know, the markets, again, with the volatility, we've seen a little bit of a return from our lows of 33,000 from Bitcoin. We've seen it go up to 38,000. We've seen a little bit of a retracement there over today's market. This is on the heels of the Federal Reserve's meetings we had sometime today, talking about the tapering and potential rate rise that we have here in the future, looking to be potentially March. And it seems as though we have a few quotes coming out of that meeting. Quote, I would say that the committee is of mind to raise the federal funds rate at the March meeting, assuming that conditions are appropriate for doing so. This leads you to believe that right now they're kind of taking a time back. They're not actually raising the rates, but they really are putting that line towards March, which we already kind of heard this back in December. And it seems as though March is going to still be that line, which gives it sort of a little bit, moving that cliff a little bit further along. So it should be interesting to see how the markets react to this information, although I don't see it being well, and I see the volatility maintaining itself all the way through till March. With the Fed making these statements and looking to keep rates low for the time being and continuing buying some corporate assets, it looks as though inflation obviously is going to continue to rise in the interim. I think there was some hopes from the Federal Reserve in that making some of these statements, and I may have said this before, that they would actually have the market sort of do some of the work for them. Generally, the Federal Reserve understands that the market and people will react to things that they say and statements they make. So I believe that they had put this sort of plan in place a little while ago, hoping that there would be some sort of easing from the markets itself and not having them to have to step on the brakes too hard, because they're in between a rock and a hard place. Now, if they're to step on the brakes very hard, we could potentially see a stock market crash. It could put a squash to the inflation, which is what their goal would be to sort of keep people happy, slow that inflation where it's at 7%, even though it's probably really higher. They're using inflated and pretend CPI numbers. But if they are to do that immediate braking, that could be a crash and cause a lot of fear and potential real downturn in the economy. So I think they're using this as sort of an easing into the process way and hoping that this sort of downturn or volatility in the market will take a slow taper, to use the same sort of word that they like to use, and bring it down slowly. As we can imagine, this is definitely going to do something to the economy, but I don't think they're looking to have it go in a steep downward spiral based on rash decisions. So as usual, we're going to keep an eye on the market from a perspective of what is the Fed saying and what are the macro sort of regulations coming out of the US government and the Federal Reserve, what games they're playing. But these are big dogs in the space, and when they start to make some plays, it generally has a worldly effect. So it's always interesting to see those Fed meetings come up and sort of how it takes a turn for it. We did see the markets have a little bit of run up. If you're a bit of a punter, it's always fun to kind of sometimes see whether it's going to make that run up or run down. And it's even fun during watching the show that you can actually see it go up or down sometimes. And it's fun to see, just based on what he's saying, a live time reaction from the markets. It's a very interesting concept as a whole. I figured while we're talking about the markets and the Federal Reserve that we should take a look at the markets itself and jump over to CoinMarketCap, which I usually like to look at. It seems as though our market cap today is at about 1.6 trillion, which is about 400 billion down from our 2 trillion sort of all-time highs there, which was some great numbers to see. I did hear calls for on the way to 10 trillion, as we could potentially see at the end of this bull run. I'm gonna say that's gonna be pretty far off at this point. My heart's still in the bull run, but we're seeing nothing but down here. Let's actually I like to take a quick glance at the right here, all the bars, and just see the average of reds, right? So we can see it's still, seeing quite a bit of red. So we're definitely in a down space. There's nothing making some crazy turns, right? Sometimes I like to look for those outliers as a good one to sort of, what's this, Bora Bora? I would love to be there. This looks like this could be, this one's doing a little something, but I guess that's probably just sort of a meme coin play. Who knows? If we actually click on Bitcoin, let's look at the charts, sort of see what we did in the last day or two. So here's the 7-day. I'm actually going to zoom out to the 3-month. I like to be able to give myself a little bit of perspective on that sort of bounce there. There we go. That's a good indication of what we've sort of seen as a rally into, right? So this has been the last day or two that we've seen coming up to these Fed meetings. I would say this is coming out of it with it not being necessarily bullish news, right? So the Federal Reserve not having bullish, or as they would say, hawkish or dovish. It's got undertones of both sides and kind of kicking the can down the road, so to speak. So this is the result we get. I again love to sort of zoom out, let's do the year look and look at what we're doing. Look at this angle that we're kind of starting to take here. There is some note that we still haven't hit that bottom 29,000 where we did see earlier this year, which are at the end of last year or earlier this cycle. I think there's going to be a range here that people are playing off of to see whether or not that's going to be some sort of support or resistance there. If it does, at best, I would imagine it's going to be some sort of consolidation phase, but getting back to these all-time highs and then further, might be a hard press at this point. I believe there's a lot of analysts out there actually calling for it to kind of be a bear run, but you know, hey, we've always got the next run to keep our hearts there. And to kind of wrap up our stories today, I wanted to continue our journey around the world, and we're heading to a familiar place, El Salvador, where it seems as the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is actually urging the country to rethink its legal status for crypto and Bitcoin as a whole. This is notable because recently El Salvador had requested a $1.3 billion loan from the IMF, which is in the business of lending out to countries across the world. Now, when they have a loan request out there and aren't playing by the rules they want to, it puts you in a hard place, and you can start to understand that they're going to more than likely strong-arm the country when it comes to holding that application for $1.3 billion. No, I did not stutter. In money to help with their own economy. In a quote, the IMF states financial stability, financial integrity, and consumer protection as the cause for this suggestion that they are looking to in place on El Salvador. They look to not be too interested not only on Bitcoin's legal tender status, but also the potential for the country to issue Bitcoin-backed bonds in the country. This based on the El Salvadorian president stating in November that it was actually looking to issue crypto-backed bonds, or specifically Bitcoin-backed bonds, with a nice noticeable 6.5% interest rate potential increase on it, and having about $1 billion worth of bonds listed. So this, they do not want to play, as I think the IMF will actually see this as competition and really don't want to see that in the space. When they're in the business of lending out money, they don't want their own countries to make their own sort of bond plays, allowing other countries to buy into that country. They want to maintain their control, as any leadership would like to do, and any sovereignty would like to prefer to maintain leadership on this. So as I said, I think this is a strong arm move for our country, our sort of meme country in the crypto space. Not that they're doing anything silly, but they're definitely on the forefront of crypto and bringing it to adoption. So we like to see news coming out of there. We like them to hold strong and really sort of see this be an interesting play for a country that could use the leg up that crypto can bring to it. When it comes to first world, second world, third world, you know, moving through the ranks of where places are, it's not often that a lower ranking country, not sitting in first world status, or let alone playing in the same leagues as someone like Russia, China, or the US, it's interesting to see an opportunity come along where they can elevate their status to a new level based on an asset that provides them with independence and stability, potentially. So this is what I think the country sees, and the president actually sees as Bitcoin being its foray into that, but crypto as a whole going to be a very interesting place for countries in this position to continue to use and hopefully elevate their rank, as I had stated. As usual, El Salvador is not shy of being in the news, so I'm sure we'll hear more about this and sort of how this plays out over time. This is a very big player, the IMF, and El Salvador, who has made themselves a big player in the space and in the news recently. And you know, honestly, I've got to root for them, and I look forward to see what happens coming out of this, and I hope that they stay strong and don't get bullied into a space that they don't want to be. All right, guys, thank you for sticking around. I hope you found some of this useful. I look forward to bringing you my next set of news in a few days or two. Again, I try to do this at the end of the day after I've done work, so I'm putting this together as fast as I can, trying to keep up to date, and I would love to keep improving it and bring it more fast up to date so that it's a little bit more useful, a little more concise, a little more put together, not so rambly. So let me know in the comments below what I can do to help that. Ultimately, I'm just going to keep working forward at it. I appreciate any of your support. If you found any of it useful, you know what to do. The like, the subscribe, it really does help the channel. And hopefully you can help me grow this a little bit, because I do enjoy talking about the news, and I think it's interesting to pay attention to those macro scale things that really can affect all of our portfolios. So I'll see you guys in the next video.